When Trump-era trade wars, tariffs, and tough talk shook international alliances, one country consistently found itself in the political crosshairs: Canada. Despite being America's neighbor and longtime partner, Canada faced unexpected hostility under Trump's policy decisions. From aluminum tariffs to border tension, Canada endured more than its fair share of political whiplash. But Canada wasn't standing alone. Across the globe, countries began stepping forward to show their support through words, trade, and diplomacy. Whether through strengthened deals or bold public backing, these nations made it clear Canada had friends, even when Washington wasn't acting neighborly. Today on Globe Discoveries, we're counting down 10 countries that stood with Canada when Trump's policies put it in the hot seat. From unexpected allies to longtime partners, here's who backed the maple leaf when things got rough. Number 10. Ireland. Ireland may be small in size, but it proved to be a vocal supporter of Canada during Trump's unpredictable global maneuvering. When trade tensions boiled over in 2018 and again in 2025, Irish leaders publicly condemned U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. They described the measures as unjustified punishment of a key global partner. Beyond rhetoric, Ireland ramped up trade outreach to Canada, expanding agricultural and tech partnerships. Dublin viewed closer ties with Ottawa as a way to reinforce a rules-based international trade system. The two countries also collaborated through the EU-Canada Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement (CETA), which gained renewed relevance as U.S. relations faltered. Irish media frequently highlighted Canada's measured approach to diplomacy, contrasting it with Trump's fiery rhetoric. This fueled public support in Ireland for greater bilateral cooperation. Cultural ties, shared democratic values, and a common disdain for protectionist tactics helped deepen this transatlantic bond. In 2025, Ireland even joined Canada in a joint UN resolution pushing for fair trade practices and mutual respect between allies. This symbolic move made headlines across both countries, reinforcing Ireland's support on the world stage. When America turned inward, Ireland leaned outward toward Canada. Though far apart geographically, Ireland proved that size doesn't determine loyalty. Its consistent backing of Canada stood out during a time of fractured alliances and rising tensions. Number 9. Germany. Germany didn't mince words when Trump's tariff policies began upsetting global economic order, and it didn't hesitate to throw its weight behind Canada. As one of Europe's strongest economies, Germany openly criticized the U.S. decision to impose duties on Canadian exports, calling it a threat to international trade harmony. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz stood firmly with Prime Minister Trudeau on multiple occasions. The economic alliance between Berlin and Ottawa only grew stronger during the turbulence. Germany pushed for deeper ties through CETA and fast-tracked joint ventures in green energy and infrastructure. As the U.S. tightened its economic walls, Germany and Canada worked together to open more. In 2025, Germany and Canada signed a new clean hydrogen trade deal, signaling confidence in long-term cooperation beyond traditional industries. The two countries also co-hosted climate summits, strategically demonstrating shared leadership where U.S. withdrawal was felt. It wasn't just talk, it was action. German media also praised Canada's calm, pragmatic response to Trump's confrontational tactics. Canadians were viewed as level-headed and reliable, a sharp contrast to the erratic tone coming from Washington. That narrative shaped public opinion and encouraged more German-Canadian cultural and academic exchanges. In every way, Germany proved itself a powerful friend in uncertain times. Its support wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic, grounded, and forward-thinking. Number 8. Japan. Japan has long had a close working relationship with Canada, and during the Trump years, that partnership grew even stronger. When Trump targeted both Japan and Canada with steel tariffs and aggressive trade rhetoric, Japan and Canada found themselves on common ground. Rather than retreat, Tokyo moved closer to Ottawa diplomatically and economically. Japan was quick to express solidarity with Canada at G7 and WTO meetings, arguing against isolationist and unilateral U.S. policy shifts. The two countries collaborated to preserve multilateral trade agreements like the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership after the U.S. pulled out. In doing so, Japan effectively helped position Canada as a leader of the free trade movement. In 2025, Canada and Japan deepened cooperation in the semiconductor and AI sectors, an intentional counterbalance to U.S.-China tensions. Tokyo saw Canada as a stable tech partner and a gateway into North American markets without the political volatility. These partnerships were both practical and a political statement. Culturally, the friendship was also visible. Student exchange programs and tourism between the two nations surged, and both countries held joint cultural festivals to symbolize unity. Their shared values of diplomacy, democracy, and global cooperation only strengthened the bond. Japan's quiet strength and strategic partnership with Canada during turbulent political times made it one of the most reliable backers. As Washington turned transactional, Tokyo chose trust and Canada noticed. Number 7. Australia. Australia has never been afraid to speak up for its allies, and in the midst of Trump's combative trade agenda, Canberra stood firmly with Canada. When U.S. tariffs hit Canadian exports, Australian officials labeled the actions disruptive and damaging to long-standing partnerships. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese publicly supported Canada's efforts to uphold multilateral trade frameworks. The bond between Canada and Australia runs deep, both being members of the Commonwealth and like-minded nations in global affairs. During trade tensions with the U.S., the two countries ramped up collaboration on agriculture, education, and defense. This pivot was both a practical response and a political alignment against isolationism. In 2025, Australia joined Canada in pushing reforms at the WTO, aimed at defending smaller economies from unfair trade practices. Both nations also co-sponsored environmental and indigenous rights initiatives at the UN, creating a broader platform for cooperation. These moves showed that their friendship extended far beyond economics. Culturally, Australians expressed admiration for Canada's calm handling of diplomatic pressure. Social media campaigns, editorials, and student forums in Australia echoed support for Trudeau's policies against Trump's heavy-handed tactics. This grassroots backing helped solidify people-to-people ties between the two nations. For Canada, Australia wasn't just a partner, it was an echo of shared values. Their alignment through turbulent times proved that distance means little when diplomacy speaks the same language. Number 6. France. France didn't hold back when Trump targeted Canada with tariffs and harsh rhetoric. It pushed back with equal force and clear loyalty. French President Emmanuel Macron was among the first to publicly defend Canada at G7 summits, even clashing with Trump over his treatment of America's northern neighbor. France labeled the U.S. approach aggressive, unpredictable, and damaging to unity. Canada and France deepened their cooperation across multiple fronts in response to the chaos. From arts and culture to cybersecurity and environmental action, their governments coordinated joint initiatives to show resilience. The CETA agreement also helped fast-track French-Canadian business links, especially in food and clean energy sectors. In 2025, France awarded Canada a top-tier partner status in its Indo-Pacific strategy, citing Canada's stable leadership and shared geopolitical outlook. Paris saw Ottawa not just as a friend, but as a counterweight to shifting American priorities. It was a calculated and confident display of support. French citizens mirrored their government's position. Canadian musicians, chefs, and climate advocates found growing fan bases in France, and both nations enjoyed a spike in cultural festivals and academic partnerships. As U.S.-France relations cooled, the France-Canada axis quietly grew warmer. France reminded the world that principled friendship still has a place in international politics. When the U.S. turned its back, Paris extended a hand and Canada didn't forget. Number 5. South Korea. South Korea and Canada have always shared mutual respect, but Trump's tariff policies brought them closer than ever. As Washington levied trade barriers against both countries, Seoul and Ottawa found themselves united by common frustrations and common goals. The two nations intensified cooperation in digital trade, green tech, and academic research to counterbalance economic uncertainty. In 2025, South Korea publicly backed Canada at WTO hearings related to U.S. aluminum tariffs. Officials in Seoul described Canada as a pillar of economic fairness and called for joint resistance against rising protectionism. This alignment was more than diplomatic, it was strategic. South Korea also signed a new bilateral trade agreement with Canada, further loosening tariffs on cars, pharmaceuticals, and electronics. With the U.S. pulling back from multilateral frameworks, Korea saw Canada as a key access point to the North American market. The move was widely praised by economists on both sides. Culturally, there was a surge in Korean-Canadian student exchanges and entertainment collaborations, particularly in film and digital media. Korean audiences resonated with Canada's inclusive values and policy transparency. It was a friendship rooted in resilience and trust. In a world of shifting allegiances, South Korea's commitment stood out. Their support wasn't loud, but it was consistent, calculated, and built to last. Number 4. Netherlands. The Netherlands has always been a quiet force in international diplomacy, and during Trump's combative trade era, it became an unexpected champion for Canada. Dutch leaders spoke out against Trump's America First stance, especially as it targeted Canadian industries. The Dutch Foreign Ministry even called some U.S. measures economically reckless and diplomatically counterproductive. The Netherlands and Canada reinforced their partnership through CETA, expanding cooperation in agriculture, water management, and sustainable energy. Dutch companies began relocating logistics hubs to Canada, preferring a market less subject to political volatility. For many Dutch businesses, Canada became the new North American gateway. In 2025, the two countries co-led a UN resolution on climate-smart infrastructure, positioning themselves as leaders in green diplomacy. The collaboration helped both nations sidestep the noise coming from Washington and focus on real progress. It also sent a message: global leadership doesn't require U.S. approval. Public sentiment in the Netherlands heavily favored Canada during this period. Dutch media highlighted Canada's calm and principled stance, contrasting it with what they called America's temperamental foreign policy. This favorable coverage helped fuel greater cultural exchanges and public goodwill. The Netherlands may not make headlines often, but its alliance with Canada during tough times was loud in all the right ways. It was a reminder that diplomacy done quietly can still leave a powerful mark. Number 3. New Zealand. New Zealand may be small in population, but it carries significant moral weight on the global stage, and it used that voice to support Canada during Trump's turbulent policy years. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and later her successor, consistently sided with Canada at multilateral forums, emphasizing fairness, diplomacy, and climate accountability. The partnership went beyond trade; it was ideological. As Trump's rhetoric escalated, New Zealand echoed Canada's calls for unity in the international community. Both countries doubled down on multilateralism, upholding institutions like the WTO and the UN when the U.S. opted for unilateralism. In 2025, they launched a joint climate adaptation fund to assist Pacific Island nations, further asserting leadership without U.S. involvement. New Zealand media frequently portrayed Canada as a stabilizing global actor amid rising political polarization. Public support for Canada's leadership surged, especially in contrast to Trump's aggressive approach. The Kiwi public embraced Canada's open, collaborative model. Education and agriculture became two powerful bridges between the nations. Canadian universities saw a spike in New Zealand applicants, and joint research on sustainable farming received international praise. These shared efforts positioned both countries as forward-thinking, environmentally conscious allies. When the world's biggest powers fought over tariffs and influence, New Zealand and Canada quietly led by example. Their partnership was proof that diplomacy still had room for kindness and strength. Number 2. Norway. Norway has a long-standing reputation as a global peace broker, and in the face of Trump's unpredictable foreign policy, it stood firmly behind Canada. Norwegian officials praised Canada's commitment to multilateralism, fair trade, and democratic values, often using their own international platforms to reinforce Ottawa's position. In 2025, Norway openly criticized U.S. sanctions on Canadian tech firms as economically irresponsible. Canada and Norway also increased military and environmental collaboration through NATO and the Arctic Council. With both countries deeply invested in Arctic sovereignty, they developed joint defense protocols and climate research missions. This mutual investment boosted trust and underscored shared northern interests. At the diplomatic level, Norway and Canada formed a united front in climate finance negotiations, pushing back against U.S. obstructionism. Their partnership became a model of transatlantic cooperation that didn't rely on Washington's blessing. It showed how small but stable democracies can punch above their weight. Norwegian media lauded Canada as the calm in the global storm, applauding Trudeau's handling of trade and diplomacy under pressure. The admiration spilled into cultural initiatives, with Canadian artists and academics featured at Norwegian forums and festivals. It wasn't just political, it was personal. With diplomacy rooted in mutual respect and shared vision, Norway became one of Canada's most dependable allies. Their bond proved that when powerful countries falter, principled ones rise. Number 1. United Kingdom. When Trump's policies began straining traditional alliances, the United Kingdom didn't hesitate to stand by Canada, its oldest Commonwealth partner. Despite the UK's own tensions with Washington during the Trump years, it routinely echoed Canada's calls for stability, free trade, and multilateral cooperation. London and Ottawa were often on the same page, especially at G7 summits where Trump's isolationist stance left a void. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau held multiple joint press conferences reinforcing their commitment to global institutions like NATO, the WTO, and the Paris Climate Agreement. In 2025, the UK fast-tracked trade negotiations with Canada post-Brexit, crafting a deal that emphasized transparency, innovation, and sustainability. The message was clear: Canada mattered more than appeasing a volatile White House. Culturally and economically, the UK doubled down on its relationship with Canada. Universities expanded cross-Atlantic research partnerships, and British investment in Canadian green tech surged. Meanwhile, joint media projects and cultural festivals promoted unity and resilience across both societies. Public opinion in the UK strongly favored Canada throughout the Trump era. British media framed Canada as a voice of reason during international discord, and Canadian diplomacy was widely admired. Even as the UK juggled its post-Brexit identity, it saw Canada as a steady, principled ally. By every metric, trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange, the UK was Canada's most steadfast supporter. And as the global order wobbled, London made it clear that some alliances are worth defending, no matter who's in the White House. While Trump's policies may have strained U.S. relations around the globe, they inadvertently strengthened Canada's global support network. From Europe to Asia and the Pacific, countries saw Canada as a trustworthy partner, a diplomatic counterweight, and a symbol of stability. These 10 nations didn't just offer words, they offered deals, platforms, and long-term cooperation. Whether it was through new trade agreements, climate initiatives, or cultural exchange, these alliances showed that Canada didn't stand alone when the pressure rose. And in a world shaken by unpredictable leadership, the countries that stood by Canada proved that diplomacy still thrives on principles. Which country's support surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe to Globe Discoveries, and stay tuned for more untold global stories that shape our world. Thanks for watching.